What is up, everybody? It is the start of free agency, and we are getting ourselves comfortable in this early afternoon, if you will, to talk about some Buffalo Bills kind of NFL free agency. There's a lot of things happening around the league. We got a lot to get into, some things happening with the Bills the last couple of days in the lead up. The last time we talked to you, we had the DJ Moore trade that we got into. Connor McGovern signed, and that signing became even more interesting with some of the developments today. We'll get into so many things over the next maybe hour and a half or so here on Free Agency Day One live stream. Shout Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. He's Ryan Talbot. What's up, buddy?
Hey, not too much. Excited to talk about all the moves that have been made, especially with now former Bills, I guess we can say. Buffalo not too active yet, which I don't think should be too surprising to this fan base.
It isn't. And like, if you take the three, like the how the Bills went into free agency, like this has been a bit of a departure from the norm for Brandon Beane, right? Like usually when they get to the start of their free agency prep, maybe there's like 15 to 20, there was 22 unrestricted free agents this year. You're expecting them to sign back a couple of those guys, right? Even before you get close to the start of free agency. And that just wasn't the case this year. The first guy that they truly signed back that probably counts in that unrestricted free agent pot. And maybe you could talk about Fedarian Mathis, although he was kind of in a different pot for me. Connor McGovern gets done right before the start of free agency. And that's where I want to start. We're going to talk about the guys that are no longer on the team, Reggie Gilliam, David Edwards, and Mitch Trubisky. But McGovern's interesting because that came into play a couple days before the start of free agency. Brandon Beane locks him down on a 4-year, $52 million contract, which comes in at about $13 million per season. And that is a dramatic hometown discount. If you think about some of the projections that McGovern was going to get on the open market, and Tyler Lindenbaum today with an absolute bomb of a contract. He gets $80 million over 3 seasons, $27 million per season. That is an absolute bomb. And you think about McGovern, if he waits maybe to free agency and Lindenbaum makes that deal, you're probably looking at somewhere between $20 and $22 million per season if you're McGovern. So the bill, it looks like Brandon Beane got one heck of a discount here.
Yeah, huge discount. You're right. And I get it. Tyler Lindenbaum was the crown jewel of the center position in free agency, but I don't know if he's that good, that kind of money good. That's crazy money for a center. And you're right. Had he gone to free agency, that being Connor McGovern, he probably would have been the next man in line to get a significant deal and to get some offers that were pretty high. So for the Bills to come in, get him at about $13 million per year on average, well below the projections that were out there. A lot of projections in that $18 million range. It's a huge win for the Bills because we've been sitting here now for months, Matt, saying it's probably one or the other. I don't think that we ever thought it was going to be neither. I mean, with the Bills cap situation, I guess neither was a possibility, but the Bills have always loved to keep as much of their O-line intact as possible. So you knew there was a possibility that one could come back. And when you get Connor McGovern at that, whatever it is, APY average per year, or I can't go against that based on what he's done. And oh, by the way, he has guard versatility. So let's just say that the Bills wanted to try Cedric Van Pran-Granger, and I don't think that's going to happen. At center, you could kick McGovern over to guard. He's played it before. So the versatility is there as well. There's a lot to like about this deal.
There's a lot still probably going to happen before the start of the league year. The Dawson Knox situation has to get figured out. I know Bills fans are waiting and wondering why a couple of these things haven't been done yet. Some of it might have been done. It just hasn't come out yet, whether it's the Josh Allen restructure, maybe an extension for Deion Dawkins or something else, maybe a brand new or a restructure and kicking the can down the road with him. And then the Dawson Knox thing is interesting. It feels like the Bills are just like leaving this at arm's length for as long as they can, because I think what this ultimately could the result of this could be is like you're looking at some of the contracts that are being handed out around the league today at the tight end position. Obviously, Isaiah Likely, one of the top prizes, he gets 40 over 3 years. Then you're thinking about a couple of these other guys. I mean, Charlie Kohler gets 3 for 24, and you start to think about, all right, that sounds probably where you'd want to live with Dawson Knox. But my big question is, can you even afford that contract with Dawson Knox, knowing what you're going to be paying Dalton Kincaid on a 5th-year option? Potentially down the road as an extension candidate, is that where you want to be spending all of your resources when what you ask Dawson Knox to do, I think in a lot of ways you can get that from another player, whether it be a rookie, a lower end free agent. Tyler Higbee went for 2 for $8 million. So that would be something that I would be a lot more interested in, but it's a hard decision. Like they might have to straight up just move on from Dawson Knox, let him test the free agent waters.
Which he's earned that right. He's had a really solid Bills career, but the truth of the matter is he's not worth close to what the Bills are projected to be paying him in 2026. So if you can't redo the deal, if you can't figure out a way to make that work, yeah, let him go. Let him test the market. Give him a ballpark number that you'd be willing to bring him back at and let him test, what's out there. That's where the Bills are at right now. He is not the focal point of the tight end room anymore. That's Dalton Kincaid. They brought in Hawes last year via the draft, and as good of a blocker as he is, he showed that he can catch the ball as well. So you've already got 2 guys there. They liked Latu last year enough to kind of elevate him multiple times. So you could even throw him into the bucket. At some point, some of these fan favorites need to go. We saw it with Taron Johnson. The writing was on the wall. He wasn't a fit. They were able to trade him. Dawson Knox might just be the next person that needs to go. As much as he's liked, as much good as he's done over the years in Buffalo, you can't justify Knox's current cap hit in terms of keeping him here on the Bills.
So we got a fun show planned out for you. We got 5 guests lined up that are going to pop in for a little 10 to 15 minute segment across the league. One of our favorites in the market as well. We're going to have Antoine Staley at 4:15. Mike Giannetti from SpotTrack.com will join us at 4:30. Ben Raven covers the Lions for M Live. Does a great job. We'll bring him in for a little bit of an NFC rundown. Adam Hill from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Obviously, a lot to talk about with him. The Linderbaum deal is super interesting, what they're doing with the Raiders as well. And then Carl Jones from Channel 4, he'll join us as well. And speak of the devil, he is in the house right now. Let's see if we can bring him in here. Gonna fix there we go. Antoine Staley, man, coming in late notice, coming to hang with the boys for a little while. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how y'all doing?
We're doing
Can't
great.
complain.
And I feel like in Jets land, it's an interesting, awkward, weird offseason as usual. Like, what is the path forward? Like, this big trade kind of comes out today with Minkah Fitzpatrick, and I actually think that's a great dude to add to a defense that is trying to rebound after losing a couple of their stars. What's your big takeaways on day one here from a Jets perspective?
Well, I mean, I think that started the morning too, and then obviously signing Demario Davis, I think is really big too, just simply because I mean I know he's a little bit older, but also like he's a sound tackler there, great locker room guy too as well, and somebody also Aaron Glenn knows back from with the Saints too, back when he was with the Saints, he's a defensive backs coach. So to be able to, I think this year as opposed to last year, I really see like the Jets are bringing in their own guys, Glenn in particular as well, guys that know his system there, especially considering he's going to be the defensive play caller moving forward, in this hybrid 3-4 system that they're going to have. And then adding pass rushers there, the Jets were like, they had the second fewest sacks as of last year next to the 49ers. So they'll be able to make some additions there, get Davis in addition to Minkah Fitzpatrick, somebody that they need the ball hawk and safety for years. And, I know Minkah's a little bit older too, but to be able to swing at him, at least get him for 2 years. And also probably they'll end up drafting somebody. I think it's pretty good additions. It's not major splashes in Jets land, but it's good sound decision making, especially considering all the money that they have and all the holes that they have on their roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Some good additions early on for the Jets, and for the Bills, not so much action so far, but a lot of players lost, and one of which is Reggie Gilliam, fullback, staying within the division. Initial thoughts on the contract that Reggie Gilliam ended up getting, and then obviously maybe what you think of him potentially with the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a sound move for them because obviously the Patriots want to be a physical team there, especially under Vrabel as well. To be able to get a guy like that has some, experience there and also a gritty type of fullback, I think it's a good move for them. And also at the same time, kind of stealing, a player away from your division rival is never a bad thing too, as well.
It's funny too with the Gilliam move. The Patriots have made it a habit under Vrabel now of like poaching Bills guys. Like they did it with Mac Hollins last year, which they weren't going to meet that number for Mac on a 2-year, $10.5 million contract. And then fast forward to this year, and Reggie Gilliam, he's made $8.9 million in 6 seasons with the Bills, and he's getting a 3-year deal for $12 million, up to $6 million guaranteed. That is just big time money. And Ryan, I like your thoughts on this. Some of the commentary around this move has to have you thinking about maybe an ideology change a little bit offensively with what the Bills want to be at this point. You have to change in this league, right? Like you have to adapt. When teams decide to defend you a certain way, you got to come up with a new iteration. And to me, moving on from Gilliam, depending on how they replace him, this could be a bigger push into the passing game and maybe some of the different passing heavy personnel packages.
Yeah, it's funny. A few weeks ago, you and I were sitting here kind of scratching our heads at a comment Joe Brady made about Khalil Shakir saying, he's not just a guy that can catch the ball in the screen game. He can be used in other ways. And you and I were kind of joking about it. Well, you're the offensive coordinator. That should have been something you knew in the last 2 years. But this to me really does strike that maybe the offense that we've seen from Buffalo the last 2 years had Sean McDermott's fingerprints in it, where McDermott said, we want to control the clock. We want to make sure that we can run the ball well. We want to have this type of personnel packages, whatever the case may be. And Joe Brady adjusted what his ideal vision for an offense is. Now, fast forward a little bit, they let Reggie Gilliam leave in free agency. So maybe the fullback is not going to be a huge part of this offense. They bring in DJ Moore, someone that's obviously very familiar with what Joe Brady did in Carolina. I think there is going to be a shift in terms of what this offense looks like. I think they're going to open it up more downfield. They're going to find ways to get the ball in the hands of James Cook, but it's not just going to be running the ball. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. That's a big Pete Carmichael Jr. Aspect of what he did in New Orleans. So it is fascinating because when Reggie Gilliam signed that contract today, it did make me think, okay, this offense is going to look a lot different in terms of the personnel from last year to this year.
Yeah, I think just going back, I remember Joe Brady in Carolina. I felt like they kind of opened it up a little bit more than what they did with the Bills too. And obviously they had some quarterbacks. You didn't have a Josh Allen there, but you had Sam Darnold had some talent too. Obviously Baker Mayfield too as well. So yeah, I'll be curious to see like if it looks very similar to where it was under Matt Rule in Carolina.
Interesting report coming out in the last 15 minutes. Connor Hughes in your neck of the woods reporting that the Jags are entertaining offers for wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. And, it's interesting here in Buffalo with the Bills just pulling the trigger on the DJ Moore trade. Thomas Jr. has long been a coveted target for Bills fans. I think a lot of Bills fans were hoping Brandon Beane would have been a little bit more aggressive in that draft year and going up and getting Brian Thomas Jr. instead of trading back and ending up with Keon Coleman. The Jets and the Giants both explored Thomas at the trade deadline last year. The Bills were also in the mix there. So what are your thoughts on that potential movement of the player? And from a Bills perspective too, after you talk about it from a Jets perspective and Giants, is it something that even after you make a Moore deal, that should be something you're still looking to do, even if it costs you draft capital?
Yeah, I mean, to answer that question, yeah, I mean, depending on how much it is, like you always want to call and find out, like if you can make any distance for really good players. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a really good receiver too. But still young there, has a ton of talent. I always felt like he was overshadowed in college by Malik Neighbors, which is crazy because we're talking about him potentially going to the Giants and teaming up with Neighbors once again, like his LSU teammate. But yeah, I mean, I think from a Jets perspective, Yeah, you definitely would add as many receivers as possible, especially considering so much pressure was on Garrett Wilson last year, and he missed 10 games. And I really feel like they kind of hindered the offense a little bit as well, in addition to obviously everything else that kind of went with the Jets, including the quarterback situation that was just kind of like a bit of a carousel there. But, I think from the Giants' perspective, especially under Harbaugh, I think that would make a lot of sense there, especially with Jackson Dart there, being able to get another weapon that he can, be familiar with too. Obviously, all those guys are SEC guys, so that'd be kind of interesting to have all those guys kind of be in the fold. And yeah, if you're Buffalo, you need to add as much talent as possible, especially in the AFC where it continues to get stronger and stronger each year. And you don't necessarily have the grasp on the AFC East like you once did.
Absolutely, Antoine. Usually the first day of the free agency, there's some funny money getting thrown around. Are there any deals that made you kind of eyes pop out a little bit? Were you shocked by any of these deals early today?
Two of them. The Linderbaugh deal, I was like, whoa, like, that's a lot of money for a set. But the Raiders need all the offensive line that can help they can get, especially when you have a young quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, who we think is coming. You want to be able to protect him. And why not have a quality center, the best available on the market? So that and Jalen Phillips. The Jalen Phillips, I was like 80 mil guaranteed. I like what? Like I think he's a tremendous, really good player, but 80 million guaranteed. I was completely shocked by that.
We got, the Cincinnati Bengals are making some noise on the defensive side of the ball here in the last hour or so. The big one just now, Boye Mafe, fresh off a Super Bowl. He's getting 3 years and $60 million from the Cincinnati Bengals. And you think about reshaping that defensive line and that defense, obviously Brian Cook too, the safety from Kansas City earlier. Those are two big time additions. Mafe was one of my top tier free agent targets for the Bills. And, I don't know how they necessarily fit that number in at this point to open up on Wednesday, because they're going to have to get cap compliant just to onboard DJ Moore's salary on Wednesday. And then they can restructure him and open up like 20 million or whatever it ended up being, 17 million, which will be fine. But you're probably in a spot where you're costing yourself a run at some of these guys. But, Cincinnati adding two of the more premier names in the free agent market here.
Yeah, they did much needed. I mean, we're talking about one of the worst defenses in football last year too, as well. So to be able to get some help there on that D line and also in the secondary, I think it's huge. And we already know their offense is going to be good, so long as Joe Burrow stays healthy, which is always a big if there in Cincinnati. But yeah, I just felt like they've done a disservice to him and the rest of the team by not providing the amount of weapons, the good weapons that a defense needs to have, especially considering you have a window with a quarterback that can potentially get you back to a Super Bowl. Why not provide him with that support that can get them there? It seems like finally, it seems like that's going to be the case there in Cincinnati.
One more thing with the Jets here, quarterback situation. What are you anticipating the Jets to do at this point in time?
Well, it could be, Jacoby Brissett. It depends on what the Arizona Cardinals might decide to do with him if they decide to move on, which I'm still puzzled why they would, for a variety of different reasons. Because I think he had a solid season last year for them, and you need a bridge quarterback. So, obviously his familiarity with Frank Wright back in Indianapolis, I think that makes him a attractive option. Geno Smith is also another guy name you've been hearing too as well. Might be a reunion there with the Jets. It might be a little interesting because it seemed like he had some hostility towards the Jets considering how his tenure ended there. But, from what I understand, he would prefer, he wanted to go back to Miami. Obviously, that's not going to be the case now with Malik Willis going there. So this might make sense to take a swing at Geno Smith, especially considering he'd be paid the minimum. You won't have to pay him a lot of money, and you need that bridge quarterback.
Antoine, bring in the goods. Let everybody know where they can find you here as we roll through this stream. Catch up on all things Jets this week during free agency.
Find me at Antoine Staley on all social media platforms, and also find my work at nydailynews.com.
Thank you so much, my man. We appreciate you.
Thank y'all.
All right, Ryan. So we're moving right along here. I think that the big takeaway here early is it's going to be a struggle with some of these bigger names that are getting these big dollars, not just Boye Mafe, but you even look at, Odafe Owe, who, was a throwaway trade by Baltimore last year. He goes to LA, has some real success under Jesse Minter there. And now he's signing with the Washington Commanders in a 4-year, $100 million contract. There's just no way the Bills are going to be able to onboard that.
No, not at all. And you can sit there and say, oh man, this guy would be a really good fit for Jim Leonard's scheme and defense. The problem is there's a lot of teams that have a lot of money to spend in free agency, and players that have shown the ability to get after the quarterback, they're just going to get big money in free agency, and the Bills are not in a spot right now to pay for pass rushers, even if it's based on upside versus actual stats that are in front of you. So that's why a lot of these guys that have signed, the Bills really can't be in on them. So it's going to be interesting in terms of, the second wave, third wave of free agency, who's still out there. Do the Bills try to swing a trade for some players that maybe are potential fits? There's other players that you and I have talked about still available on the market, maybe not, as a premier pass rusher or anything like that, but linebacker position, Leo Chanel still out there. Bills were linked to him by Ryan Fowler. Are they going to be able to compete for him? Because there's supposedly a market of about a handful of teams that are interested in his services as well.
If you're watching across any of the 3 platforms on Facebook, X, or here on YouTube, thank you so much. Hit that like button, subscribe as well. We'll obviously be taking you up until probably around 5:45, 5:50 with just a live stream to react to everything that's been going on today. Some of the big Bills news. I want to get to David Edwards next here, who exits Buffalo after 3 seasons, 2 of them as a starter, started 32 games, 32 regular season games. I thought, for my money, would have been the best offensive lineman consistently for the Bills last year. He gets 4 years, $61 million with the New Orleans Saints. It's a really good deal for him, and it's one that I think was the expectation that he would kind of sneak up into that range a little bit. And lo and behold, he signs for that deal, which ends up being a little bit richer than the deal that Connor Montgomery got.
Yeah, guard play is important in the NFL, and David Edwards has proven over the last 2 years that he can not only just hold his own, but he's got a lot of, I would say, upside. You consider his age, the play that we've seen from him. I still think there could be more to his level of play. So the Saints going out, bringing him in makes perfect sense to me. It's a quality addition to a team that has a young quarterback that they just drafted 1 year ago. You want to protect your young quarterbacks. We were just talking about that with some of the moves across the league, obviously, with what the Raiders did at center and knowing that Mendoza's going there. So building up your own line around young quarterbacks, that's tried and true in this league in terms of a measure of success. So it makes a lot of sense that the Saints were a landing spot for David Edwards.
We want to build up this podcast stream with some young, talented cap experts. So we're bringing in Mike Giannetti from SpotTrack.com. What is up, my friend? How are you?
I'll take young, but I don't know if I believe it.
Now, where does this rank in terms of busyness scale for you this day?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I was just talking about this. This is probably the second busiest day. You're not going to believe what's the busiest day. It's the day following the draft, when it's UDFA hell, and I'm trying to figure out who's going where and what to believe and what colleges are posting versus agents versus players. That's a nightmare, but this one's fun. You know what I mean? It kind of just comes in big waves and globs, and you get a little of everything. There's conversions and trades, and it's just the works today. So it's the best the NFL has to offer.
Yeah, so I got to quickly give you some flowers. Last night, the Bills, it's announced they're trading Taron Johnson to the Raiders. Yeah. And I'm like, I better double check the numbers on that to see if it changes anything with the trade. So I go to the site, and sure enough, you already have him enlisted as a Raider within, I don't know, a minute or two, it feels like, of the news being out there. I'm like, man, this guy works fast.
Is that always you, or is there like a team of people that are doing all these transactions?
We've got some guys doing some of the other sports, but the NFL stuff's all me. I promise I have a family and a life, and I drink beers every now and then. I do. It's just sometimes you hit it right on the nose, and I was prepared for that one. But that's a nice move for Buffalo, getting a little bit of something out of nothing there. So no change dead cap wise, but they squeeze a little juice out of the end of it.
I got to dive into this with you because I texted you about it, and I think this is something that fans are struggling with. I'm even struggling with it a little bit because I'm thinking about like the roster building process and how it really bleeds all the way up until, the trade deadline, even beyond that. We saw Brandon Cooks come over on a deal after he was released by the Saints late last season. And one of the things I was thinking, because of the larger cap savings available post June 1st, why not cut them post June 1st, give you that bubble of salary that maybe gives you the kind of cushion to be able to make a move. And I know they just went out and got DJ Bourne, but Brandon Beane wants to be ultra aggressive this year, and maybe there's a training camp trade for Jalen Waddle when, Malik Willis comes in and plays his first preseason game and he's picked off 4 times, and they realize we better load up for 2027. So why not do it that way as opposed to what they did, which is looking like a pre-June first cut?
Yeah, it's a tough call on this one because everything's sort of neutral in terms of carrying his cap hit, freeing up the extra savings. Essentially, what you could consider it as is if we hold this cap hit in place and make it a post 6-1 designation, when we get the savings in June, he's going to pay for our draft class. That's essentially what that move ends up being. And generally speaking, teams do allocate some sort of move in that direction. For whatever reason, they feel like they are up against it right now in Buffalo, and they cannot stand to take even an extra $1 million of cap on the books right now, which is really what it would have been, right? To hold his current cap hit versus his dead cap hit. So I will say, having run the numbers now for quite a few years here, this is one of the stickier situations Buffalo's been here. There's only 2 or 3 salary conversions left on this roster right now. We're talking about surprising cuts or a trade or two to actually free up cap space to become somewhat aggressive, mildly aggressive in the next couple of weeks, which is why they've been basically radio silent here on Moratorium Monday.
We talked plenty. Sorry, but I just want to follow up one thing there. We talked plenty about Deion Dawkins on this podcast over the course of the offseason. We've mentioned a potential trade idea for him. Is there anybody else that floats to the top outside of Dawson Knox? Because it seems like Ed Oliver's now locked in after they restructured him.
Yeah, Ed's staying for 26 for sure with that conversion. It'd be a shocker. It'd be someone we're not thinking of. Maybe they're trying to find a taker for Josh Palmer, who, I think by the end of it will be 4th or 5th on this depth chart. We'll see what happens there. He's got a guaranteed salary in 2026, so the only option would be some sort of trade to facilitate that. But and obviously Keon is, I think, still they're taking calls on Keon right now. Let's put it that way. So I think that would do something to move a couple of million of cap space. But Rousseau and that everybody at the top of this list is fairly locked in here, both role and financially speaking. So like I said, it's one of the stickier situations that I think Brandon Beane has dealt with. And some of it is self-induced because of recent cuts and some contracts that certainly haven't hit.
Yeah, you mentioned a few of the levers left to pull out. We have not heard anything about Josh Allen, which a simple swipe of the pen gets about $12 million there. And then Matt and I were talking about Dawson Knox. Is there a gut feeling you have of what the Bills are going to do with Dawson Knox? Is it straight up release where they can free up a lot of money that way, or do you think maybe they're trying to envision something else there?
I think everything's on the board right now. I even saw a couple of people connect the dots to Tennessee there. My guess is there's been phone calls made in a couple directions there. I don't know that his contract as is tradable, and I know it's not keepable. We know that much for sure. My guess is they're still trying to hammer out a pay cut, which he's done in the past. A couple of Bills players have done in the past. I'm not sure that's the game plan here. So with really 48 hours left, the Josh conversion and something on Dawson. If I had to give you guys a guess right now, I think they ended up releasing him and starting from scratch. And even if the premise is we're planning to bring you back, but let's get out of this thing by March 11th so that we can open up some space, and then we'll go from there. That would be my guess. I don't think that contract is very tradable right now.
Oof. Yeah, it's tough, and it's tough for Bills fans who've kind of at least gotten used to with Beane over the years. Like, he gives you these warnings where it's like, don't expect us to be, in the expensive aisles. And then there's always a deal or two that I think at least gets you excited. It is literally sitting on your hands right now, waiting for anything like that little meme where the guy's poking, do something. Like, I feel like that's what Bills fans are doing right now. Let's get to Trey Hendrickson for a second, because that's one name out there.
I was about to go there myself, Matt.
Yeah, that's the one that, if you can move mountains, is there a path to any way to get that done pre the start of free agency, knowing what they have to do with Moore?
Doesn't the lack of movement either to free up space or to add new bodies right now lead you to something like that, to some kind of blockbuster? And that's the one still hanging out there, and that's the biggest need Buffalo has right now. So, yeah, it's doable, right? It's doable. You're putting them on probably a 2 for $50 practicality contract based on what we're seeing on the market right now, which is good. I mean, edge rushers are getting some money here, despite the fact that there's quite a few of them available. I still think that's the going rate for 31 and change Trey Hendrickson. But you put some void years on that sucker. You got an $8 million cap hit to start. You're clean. So I think that's very doable, and it would be a big statement to start the offseason for Buffalo, despite the fact that, after that, it's going to be tough sledding to continue to add pieces of names like that. It'll be very much depth pieces, I think.
You mentioned Joshua Palmer is maybe like an outside the box idea for a trade. One, there'll be some teams that have some cap space left over here because they're not being able to sign players that they want. What would the Bills have to likely send along with Palmer to entice a team to bring on that contract?
I don't know if it'll get to that point. It's an interesting thought, though. I don't think he's a zero. I just think the injury plus the guaranteed salary sort of puts Buffalo in a tough spot. Teams know that. GMs know that. So, maybe we're at a point where it's Palmer and a fifth to get a fourth kind of thing. You know how the swaps work in the back end.
Sure.
Which, by the way, might turn them back to Keon and say, if we can end up getting a conditional third that turns into a second, then we're doing that instead. So I do think there's probably movement to be made there because they're going to continue to add and improve that portion of the roster. There's just no doubt about it. The Bills have made that clear to start here.
So Tua is signing a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
They're eating $99 million just to get him out of town. I mean, give us a rundown on your thoughts of this whole thing, because it felt like whenever you have an entire fan base in your division celebrating when you extend your quarterback, it's a bad deal. And I remember that day on social media, like the Bills fans sending memes to Dolphins fans celebrating that decision. It's done nothing but age poorly, and obviously so. They're probably setting themselves back a couple of years with this deal. What do you make of all of this? Him landing in Atlanta, all of it.
Well, can we talk about the fact that he's not even officially released yet until Wednesday, and the NFL official account is talking about him joining the Falcons? I think we're coming a long way with this don't ask, don't tell stuff with NFL free agency. Let's put it that way. I'm going to give the Dolphins some flowers and some credit here. This was a mistake. There was a chance it wasn't going to be a mistake. He looked good before they signed him to this contract. He had a pretty good season. It just, this was never going to be a consistent situation. It's a mistake, and they're getting the heck out of this thing. They're paying him $3 million cash to be the Atlanta Falcons quarterback for 2026, or at least compete for it. And they're ripping this thing off with 60-some dead cap this year and 30-some more next year. I don't know that 31 other teams would do it this way. You know what I mean? I think there's a bunch of teams that keep him on the roster, bench him, make it super awkward, maybe try to trade him at the deadline and spin him that way. But they're ripping this Band-Aid off. So I give him credit for attempting to make him the franchise quarterback with the contract, and I give him credit for tearing this thing down as quickly as possible, because this is what we want. We want this position to be explosive, financially speaking. We want big contracts, and we want explosive releases whenever they go wrong. So I'm all in for this. This is entertaining.
Do you think a move like that, taking on that type of dead cap, the head coach, the GM there were kind of promised you're going to be given some time to right the ship, because that's not necessarily their problem. They inherited that. So in the NFL, we've seen coaches go one and done a lot where they probably assurances that we're going to do this, but we're going to let you also build it up.
I'm probably not even taking that job unless I have the assurance that this is exactly how it's going to go, right? Like, I'm not going to have to drag my feet through this. I'm not going to have to answer questions every single Sunday about if Tua is going to play and why he's sitting and all this stuff. Let's just get this thing out of here, or I'm not taking this job. And my guess is that's exactly why we landed where we landed. Similar stuff happening across the league here with Kyler, and even Anthony Richardson, I think gets moved off of Indy there. So there's just no more leash. You get 2.5 years, and then no matter what you cost, we're going to move on from this thing.
Head over to spottrack.com right now, sign up for the yearly subscription, and you get to play around with Cap Tool. Go to the Buffalo Bills roster page, hit manage roster, and you could do any trade that your heart desires, sign free agents back, the Bills' own free agents and others. It is a absolutely phenomenal tool all year long, but especially this time of year as we're kind of moving through this thing. And, if you want Trey Hendrickson and you want to figure out how it works, you can kind of mess around with it in the program. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I had one more thing for you before you get out of here. What is something that's happened today that has surprised you, if anything?
Well, you talked about the Linderbaum contract already, right? I mean, he didn't just break the center market. He broke the guard market. In one contract, he broke the guard market too. That's a game changer. We'll see what kind of unicorn status that contract gets if the Raiders really went kind of sky north on that sucker. We should probably talk Malik Willis a little bit since we just referenced Miami. This is a new day for this stuff, right? The Sam Darnold winning the Super Bowl, Baker having the comeback, Mac Jones looking good in his interims. The second life of some of these quarterbacks has been super, super fascinating, and this is just going to be the next version of it to the tune of $45 million guaranteed. So it's a pretty darn powerful position, and we'll see what happens with Malik Willis and a cast of characters in Miami in 2026.
That's the thing. It's like Malik Willis. You look up his stats, and it's eye popping to think about 6 starts in his career, 6 passing touchdowns, and he's getting $45 million guaranteed.
Did Tennessee break him and did Green Bay fix him in like an hour and a half, right? I mean, that's what we're banking on here. And by the way, like, is this the worst time for them to be signing a quarterback? I mean, the cupboards are going to be bare. I mean, completely bare. The offensive line is going to be gutted. They're certainly moving on from half their defense here. So, God bless them, but it's a sizable contract. It's gone up every single year. This bridge kind of resuscitation contract has gone up every single year. This is obviously the next leap from Justin Fields last year with the Jets. So this is a trend that I think is here to stay. We'll see who's next.
So this deal is, you think you're going to win with him in your estimation? This isn't like a bridge deal. Like, hey, we think he'll be serviceable, but we'll still be in the mix to get a quarterback in a draft that we think is going to be like, what's the approach from Miami's side to do this?
It feels like the new regime is labeling him their guy, right? They're kind of attaching him to their 3-year leash here, right? So I think it's more than just a bridge. So I guess there's a chance it's incredible value for the next 2 seasons at $45 million. But we said that with Justin Fields, and we've said that with plenty of other projects, and it just hasn't worked out that way. There's a heck of a lot of smart people that think this one's going to. So I guess for now, I'll just sort of allow that to happen. But it is the Dolphins, and there's a lot of good teams out there. Let's just say.
Spottrack.com. Head over there. This is the week that website should be going down from all the traffic. So we really appreciate you spending a little bit of your time here on the first day of free agency, basically. Mike, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Ryan, we're moving right along here on this marathon episode of Shout, a Buffalo Football Podcast. 3,500 people watching live across all platforms right now. We might just set a brand new Shout record. I think the record is somewhere around 7K. So if we beat 7K today, that's going to be a big day for us.
Yeah, and considering the lack of Bills moves, that'd be impressive. But the Bills Mafia, if anyone, they love talking about the team and who's still out there. So anything is possible.
Let me ask you, we talked about Linderbaum. Is there anything else where you saw come across your timeline today where you're like, either A, man, that was somebody that I really wanted for the Bills to take a run at, or B, something that really surprised you that they for me, like Charlie Kohler getting 324 to me is like mind boggling. He's a good player. Like, he's a good, solid player. But to me, I'm not spending $7 million per season on a tight end that has basically been a third in the Baltimore Ravens system over the last 3 or 4 years. Like, there's just some of these contracts that just feel like they're such funny money.
Yeah, teams, they're really projecting on Charlie Kohler because, like you said, he was behind Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and some flashes mixed in there, some ability for sure, but that's crazy money for someone that's not a proven entity. And in terms of the other part of the question you asked, any players that I would have liked the Bills to target, I mean, Franklin Myers, but you and I were sitting here talking about a week ago, based on the markets, based on the available talent, he was going to be the big ticket item. And sure enough, he ended up getting an amount of money where the Bills really could not have gotten in on it at that number.
he mentioned Trey Hendrickson, and that's obviously the pipe dream for Bills fans. I think what might end up being an easier path to a real impressive pass rushing presence is probably a trade with Minnesota for Jonathan Grenard.
Yep.
Because depending on that market and where it solidifies, and maybe that's something that pushes into the next couple of days. We saw Rashawn Gary get traded this morning. That really kicked off everything. I think Grenard is, I hate to say twice the player, but the production at its highest was higher than Gary. It's been since Gary's best season. I think it's been 4 seasons. So to me, Grenard had one off year. I think you could probably get him at a number that's probably going to be lower than what you're going to play Trey Hendrickson. And he's considerably younger. To me, as you're starting to look at some of the edge possible additions, that to me is where you're going. I still think even if they pull all the levers, it's going to be they'd have to pull all the levers, I think, at this point to land Hendrickson, unless he's out there talking to a couple teams and saying, yeah, get to the new league year, move some money around, and I want max value, so I'll wait till then, and then we'll put pen to paper.
Which that's a possibility. It's tough because the Bills have so many needs to address on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not sure they can even go out and get a big ticket item, just even one, because you do want to add a linebacker with some familiarity with, this scheme. And I don't think that, Alex Singleton, for instance, if they miss out on Leo Chanel, I don't think you're breaking the bank for a player like that. But you need to bring someone in. You have to eventually address the safety position, you would think, unless they really are high enough on going with some of the guys on this roster. And then the second, third wave of free agency, adding a veteran in the mix there. You want to address your pass rush in your front. So there's a lot to do there. I don't know if they have the ability to sign a Trey Hendrickson in free agency, but you're right. Making a trade with Minnesota, that makes a lot more sense with me. But the Bills also have to start pulling some of those levers if they want to make a move and bring in even, via trade, a player that's going to add again to their cap situation. So get Josh Allen to sign the restructured deal, figure out what to do with Dawson Knox. Is there a surprise move for this team to make? We'll have to wait and see. But right now, I think that all that factors into why you're not hearing the Bills linked to a lot of players.
Let's circle back to Reggie Gilliam for a moment, because obviously some emotion. I mean, this has been a fan favorite, kind of cult classic kind of player for many years. I like Reggie Gilliam a lot. I think he's been super valuable to them, what he does on special teams, all that. I'm out at the price point that the New England Patriots are paying for him. Like, even as good as he is and as important as he was to the run game, he played 25% of the snaps last year. That's a career high on offense for Reggie Gilliam. He meant a lot to what they did offensively, but at that number, I can't see spending that kind of money and basically committing to him for 2 years at that number for what you're ultimately getting and probably able to replicate. I mean, I think one of the things that we don't talk enough about is how the Bills have pivoted off of certain players that you felt like did certain things for them, that you had questions about the replacements, who ended up being maybe even in some cases better than the guys they were replacing. And I love Mitch Morse. Like, in early in his career with the Bills, he was playing at a Pro Bowl level, right? And they had to move on for financial reasons. But to say that you were going to move off of Mitch Morse and you were going to get Connor McGovern to come in and play at a Pro Bowl level at the number that they got him at, that is a huge boon for their front office. Those kinds of moves are what are kind of able to help you sustain winning.
Yeah, I mean, the first time they let go of Jordan Poyer, Taylor Rapp was kind of elevated to a starting role, and when healthy, he played well in that role. Obviously, last year he was injured, and that's why the Bills probably felt pretty comfortable moving on from him this offseason. So you're right. They've been able to swap players in and out pretty well over the years in terms of veterans that they've had to count on at one time and then part ways for financial reasons. They're going to have to do that again. And I mean, you can look at fullback if they really want to go that route and bring in a fullback. They've already kind of addressed special teams by bringing back Sam Franklin. So maybe that's kind of the counterpoint to Gilliam leaving and not being able to use him in that role anymore. You look at the backup quarterback position, Mitch Trubisky, has signed a 2-year deal with Tennessee, reunited with Brian Dable, who he played for in 2021 in Buffalo. So now they've got to figure that position out. You don't want to spend a lot of money there, but are you good with Shane Buechele, or are you going to go into the draft? So there's some moves to the Bills in terms of what they still have to do in terms of replacements for players lost, and then they've got to address especially the defensive side of the ball with this new scheme under Jim Leonhard.
We're cooking here on Shout. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, hit that like button. Let's get those likes up to as high as possible before we really get cranking here. We'll welcome in Ben Raven from M Live. He covers the Lions, get a little bit of an NFC perspective, get some of his insight, some of the moves happening around the league. We'll go to Vegas, talk to Adam Hill, covers the Raiders out there at 5:15, and then we'll close it down on this stream, at least, with Carl Jones from Channel 4. He's been doing a great series over on his social media channels, explaining in detail some of the schematic changes to expect with the Bills defense upcoming. I highly recommend people go and check that out. Where do you want to go do next, buddy?
Yeah, I guess next is we kind of have to figure out who the Bills could potentially be on. Who are some of the players still sitting on the market, Matt, that you like as a potential fit? And again, this doesn't have to be someone that the Bills signed this week. It could be a second wave, third wave player. For me, like PJ Locke at safety is one player that I'm trying to link the Bills to. Played in Denver, older player. I don't think necessarily someone that's going to go in the first day of free agency, but can come in here, gives Hancock a chance to maybe compete against him for a role. But also addresses the need to bring in someone that knows Leonard's defense to a certain extent. So is there anyone out there right now where you're thinking, okay, not going to break the bank, someone that the Bills can kind of sit and wait on that you'd like to see them bring in here?
Yeah, so there's a couple of names, and I'll go for 3 different positions, and linebacker, wide receiver, and safety. And I want to start with, probably the most redundant name when talking about linebackers throughout this free agent cycle, and that's Leo Chenal. You see some of the linebacker contracts that have gone out there. Tremaine Edmonds actually gets a little bit less than I thought he would have gotten on the open market. 3-year deal. I think it's $12 million per season. I think if you can get something done with Chenal in the, I don't know, 6 dream world per season to maybe 9 per season, I think the Bills can probably get involved in that. And that's a huge, potentially difference-making addition to the middle of their defense. At safety, I've long been talking about Reed Blankenship, a captain in Philadelphia, who I think can come in here and really free up Cole Bishop to do a multitude of things. Do you want to play him in the box more? Do you want to maybe try and have him play that nickel in a 3-4, which maybe that's the route that you go to, and that's a better fit. And maybe you want Jordan Hancock to play one of the prototypical safety spots, or maybe Bishop and Blankenship play together and you have Hancock, who you think can really fill that nickel role, or, any kind of number of ideas. And then finally at wide receiver, we talked about it on the preview show. Bills fans are going to hate it, but to me, Deebo Samuel is a guy that I think for the right number, I don't hate that addition as 4 or 5 million with a ton of incentives, maybe even lower than that, and then incentive laden deal. I think you can get behind that, because if he's healthy, he gives you real juice. Like when he was on the field last year for Washington, he was good. And they played a lot of last season without Jaden Daniels. So I'm looking at a guy like that. I just don't think, Rashid Shaheed would be perfect scenario. I just don't think they're going to be able to reach that level of what he's ultimately going to command.
No, and real quick on Deebo Samuel, I think that Bills fans might change their tune on him if he ends up being a target or getting signed. I think last year at the trade deadline, they wanted the Bills to make a big swing on a difference maker that could get them over the top come playoff time and then help them get to the Super Bowl. When you heard Deebo Samuel's name, you kind of sat there and scoffed like, okay, he's been injured a lot. He's not the same player that he once was a few years ago. If you bring him in now, it's a completely different scenario. You've already traded for DJ Moore, who's going to be that X receiver, going to be your number one. You're bringing him in to, I don't want to say a lesser role, but the expectations I feel would be completely different versus where they were at the trade deadline. And that does improve this wide receiver room with Deebo Samuel or Darnell Mooney, if you can somehow get him at a reasonable number. Players like that, I'd be all for, because I think that they're valuable contributors. They're not going to be brought in here to be that difference maker like what fans were hoping for at the deadline last year when you and I talked a lot about Olave, who obviously did not go anywhere in that point in time. Waddle, the Bills were linked to, and supposedly had the best offer out on. Shaheed. So now I think it would be a different viewpoint if they did bring in Deebo Samuel.
One name to keep an eye on. It's funny because David Edwards goes to the Saints, and one guy that ended up on that roster last year was Trevor Penning. And that's somebody that if you can get a guy that's been banged up, probably not going to get the deal that he's expecting on the market, and a very versatile player who came in as a tackle, could play both guard spots. That to me is a guy that you sign up for and you add it into the competition pile, right? You're not writing him in pen at left guard, but he's somebody that if you land on that spot, you probably feel pretty comfortable with it inside of Connor McGovern and Deion Dawkins. That's another name maybe on the offensive line that I think about.
Yeah, Jenkins as well being released by Green Bay. They moved him to center last year, which was disastrous. Didn't work out well. The money for that's why they're moving on. But he can also play guard, someone that's an older player, but competition, someone else to monitor in that position as well.
If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. We're getting through all of the free agent news that kind of came across the ticker over the course of the afternoon. We waited till 4 o'clock to have ourselves a real good bulk of moves to get into. The next one that's interesting is Mike Evans, Ryan, because the Bills were linked to him at multiple different times during the lead up to the start of free agency. He ends up getting a 3-year, $60 million contract with the San Francisco 49ers. Did you see how much of that is guaranteed?
I did not see the guarantee on that yet, but it's a big commitment for an older receiver. And again, I get it. He's been healthy for most of his career. He's had some injuries last year. That's why I didn't go over 1,000 yards and continue that streak. But 49ers are promising a lot. I believe like guarantees at least the first 2 seasons there for him, if I remember correctly, but I don't remember the number off the top of my head. It's a big commitment, and I get it. The 49ers have always been in the mix in the NFC in terms of the Super Bowl and a contender. And that's just another weapon now for that offense. But it's a risky move for a 3-year deal.
And I promised a lot of guests, and we are rolling right along with our third of the afternoon. Mr. Benjamin Raven from MLive.com covers the Lions. I feel like I just saw you in Indianapolis. So it's good to see your face once again here today. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. Awesome timing. Go on, and Decker's release gets announced the second I click in, but that's all right. That's what teammates are for. We're doing okay.
Spread the wealth. See what's going to happen here, because we're going to be on the stream for like 2 hours. If any really big Bills news happens, it's just probably wait until after we're done with the show. So it is what it is, because we're hanging out. We're doing this live stream. It's like a complete makeover on that offensive line. Obviously, some just reworking everything that's happening there. What do you make of some of the moves that have happened on that offensive line this offseason?
I thought they did great on the Montgomery trade. Obviously, they're better with David Montgomery, but getting a 4th-round pick and a 7th and a recent 2nd-round pick and Drew Scruggs, obviously increases your flexibility on the interior line as they try to figure that out. But the big one today was Panther center Cade Mays. Just everything we kind of looked into before he got signed was like, all right, this is a Dan Campbell type right here. He's big, he's nasty, plays physical, probably a little too aggressive sometimes, but that shores up the center debate right there. That's perfect. They don't have to move Tate Ratledge to center like they've been talking about for months on months on months. Now he gets to stay at right guard. You just need to add a little more left guard competition. Oh yeah, and find a new left tackle for the first time in 10 years with Taylor Decker's request for a release getting granted. No big deal.
So Larry Borum as well, I believe, today.
Yeah,
is that right? Correct? What are expectations there for him in Detroit?
It feels like that's kind of Dan Skipper retired and joined the coaching staff. He's been their kind of often used 6th lineman for those heavy sets, jumbo tight end. That feels like his ceiling. cool story for him to come home. He's a Detroit guy, brother Rice, high school guy from the area. He was celebrating that on social media. That's good tackle depth. That's good business. But like, it's hard not to look at that 17th pick in the first round and think they're doing anything other than offensive tackle, even when they thought they were going to have Decker back. Like, that was still at the top of everyone's mind. So it's still coming. I expect more guard competition, and you got to find a starting tackle somewhere. Maybe Sewell can go left. They've talked about that, so it does add some flexibility there. If you find a big, mean right tackle you'll feel more comfortable with on that side, you can move Sewell to the left side, because guess what? You're lucky and have a generational talent.
Right. The Cade Mays thing is really interesting, because you have two of the top free agent centers in McGovern here in Buffalo and Mays, who end up getting, different levels of money. And then you just get the absolute bomb of the Linderbaum deal, which is, we just had Mike Giannetti from Spock Track on, and it's like,
Nice.
that might be just one of those contracts that is in its own filing cabinet, that the door is closed and nobody's going to talk about it again, because I wonder if Mays gets what he gets, and I think McGovern probably in a tier up, but they're close.
Yeah.
Is he sitting here after seeing that deal like, man, I probably should have waited to free it? Maybe I could have got like 22 million a year after that thing.
Right. No, seriously. I mean, the value for the Lions perspective looks great, because, I mean, Linderbaum, obviously probably the best free agent in any position on the board, but like his what he's going to make per year is more than Cade Mays' entire contract. So you got to feel good about that. And I feel so justified, because I've been trying. Lions fans have been on the Linderbaum bus for like 3 months now. And I'm like, guys, Brad Holmes' biggest contract he's given out in free agency is $46 million to DJ Reed. Like, yes, they need a center more than air itself, but like, they're still technically in the red with the salary cap. Like, I think they're safe now with Decker's release becoming official, but like, they were never going to be in Linderbaum. And then when I saw McGovern come across at 52 million, I was like, I don't think they were in that either. So 25 mil for 26-year-old Cade Mays. That's right in the Brad Holmes value free agency. We're going to do this thing through the draft, no matter what approach.
We've been asking all the guests coming on, any other deals today that have really surprised you in any kind of way?
Lions centric. I was surprised at how low Alex Anzalone's deal came through, just because there was the contract dispute. I mean, we're talking about someone who's been a team captain for every season. Dan Campbell's been here. Their defense is better with him on it. I mean, everybody's like, oh, they got Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes. They're fine. It's like, Anzalone is the reason why they lived in base defense last year. He played more slot snaps than any linebacker in the league. He's their best coverage linebacker by a mile. And it's kind of nice to have a guy that's rolling the deep green dot for 7 seasons next to your young pup, Jack Campbell. Just from a leadership locker room perspective, I was kind of surprised. I had a feeling he was gone, but then when that 17 mil came through, I was just like, really? You couldn't? All right. But then outside of the Lions, I thought the Dolphins did great with the Malik Willis deal. Say what you will about him. At least that thing didn't top 30 million a season. It kind of felt Justin Fields-esque, just with another year on there. I'm sure there's some outs there, but hey, I thought that was pretty solid business for the Dolphins.
So you're actually somebody really good to ask about this, because you've seen Malik Willis up close being in that division. What do you think the expectations Dolphins fans can, because there's talent at the skill spots there, right? They have Jalen Waddle, they have Devon Achane. Their offensive line is a mess, and that's something that they're going to probably have to spend a lot of their resources on this offseason. I'm actually surprised they haven't been. But when you get $99 million dead cap charge for the next 2 seasons with Tua, I mean, it's hard to be a big spender. But you think that that's something where they're going to be competitive with Malik Willis, or how do you view that?
I kind of view it as the best they could have done for a dumpster fire situation. Like, when I saw that deal come across and it was Miami, I was like, oh, you know what? All right. It wasn't the 30 million per season people were talking about. So good job to avoid that. I think he is an answer to what feels like an unanswerable problem right now. Like, he's like the best Band-Aid to put on that while they figure it out. And who knows? I mean, from watching him up close, I mean, for the last couple of years, it was like, all right, everything the draft guys were freaking out about when this guy entered the draft, it's kind of there. He's more of a ready, the processing. I mean, I'll never forget standing outside the Lions locker room after game and watching them like freak out on the broadcast about him, like changing the call and hitting that huge shot to win a game in the fourth quarter. It was just like, all right. I mean, he's athletic. The arm talent's real. LaFleur's coaching the last couple of years probably helped, but yeah, it's like I don't expect the Dolphins to be competitive by any means necessary, but I think they did the best course possible with the disaster situation that's on their hands.
You know, Ben, you mentioned the Lions are up against a little bit very similar situation to the Bills. We've been sitting here talking about levers the Bills can still push. In the case there, are there any surprise moves you could see being done, or what levers, I guess, can still be done to help in Detroit's situation?
Restructuring Jared Goff's deal, a la the Chiefs with Mahomes. I mean, his base salary jumps to $55 million next season, so that's an easy one. I mean, the guys that come to mind for restructures are the guys that you don't feel bad about tying yourself to. It's the St. Browns, the Goffs, and the Sewells of the world, and I think that could create. I mean, I think I saw over the cap posts like the Lions could create the second most space just through simple restructures, and it was literally just those three guys. So the Goff one is the one we're kind of waiting on, because it's like, all right, Deckers gets you into the right territory, but like I don't think you have enough money to do the deals that you've just negotiated today. So more is coming for sure, but they got a big one with Goff. I mean, $55 million base salary. I mean, that could open up a whole new avenue for Brad Holmes.
Yeah.
One of the biggest moves of the day, and we can kind of roundtable this, discussing our reaction to it, was the Kansas City Chiefs signing Kenneth Walker, fresh off a Super Bowl MVP. You know, I know in the Bills fan base, a lot of doom and gloom about that, because that's been a position that the Chiefs have you haven't had to worry about the run game. And this is something that they got some really good horses up front, that if they get a guy that they really believe in, that could be a really nice piece and change the complexion of their offense quite a bit. I'm always a little bit hesitant when teams spend big money on a running back, especially Walker, who has had some issues staying healthy at different times. He was obviously super healthy on a run last year, and it worked out. What do you make, Ben, of the move? Because I'm not as doom and gloom as a lot of Bills fans are about it. There's still a lot of question marks about the Chiefs defensively as well. They got some aging stars around Patrick Mahomes, bringing back Kelsey, Chris Jones on the other side. What did you make of that deal?
You know, that's filling a good need. I mean, seriously, that's why people have kind of become obsessed with Jeremiah Love at that 9 spot for the Chiefs, is because it's like, all right, they just have had nobody in that backfield who was able to do anything after a first touch, bring anything to the passing game. And Walker definitely does have some injury concerns to him, but I think he just showed what happens when he's on the field. And, you know, there's got to be something rejuvenating about getting to go to Kansas City and play on that offense. But yeah, I'm with you. Always a little hesitant about that, and the Lions are probably about to extend Jahmyr Gibbs to a market-setting deal this offseason too, so we'll have to go through that. But I like the deal. I mean, you check a box on the need, you open up the world of possibilities at 9. You could still go Love and go into next season with a supercharged backfield as you kind of figure out Mahomes' knee and all that stuff. But I like the Walker signing. I mean, I got to see him up close a couple times at Michigan State. I mean, that's that guy, when he's healthy and he is on and tough to get to the ground. And that's kind of exactly what the Chiefs needed. Just someone to move that needle and do something if they get touched and get downfield a little bit. And that's him.
Yeah, good signing for Kansas City, no doubt about that. But the alternative was Jeremiah Love, whether that was sticking at where they were at or maybe even making a little bit of a move up. I think when you consider having someone of Love's caliber on paper on a rookie contract versus what they're going to pay Kenneth Walker, I think that's a little bit of a win if you're a fan of any other fan base other than the Chiefs out there. So I think that Love earned himself a lot of money at the combine and just leading up to this draft, where he might go well before pick number 9. And the Chiefs maybe realized that and knew they had to be players in free agency. It certainly helps their offense out. We saw how great he was in the playoffs for the Seattle, but now it's all about making him fit there in Kansas City. And, you know, that division's just getting tougher and tougher by the day and by the year. I know the Raiders are going to be a few years out of it still, but they're getting the quarterback of their future, they think. They just addressed center position in a big-time way. You know how good Denver is, and the Chargers keep making moves as well. So it's going to be a fascinating division, in my opinion.
Ben, we're booting you out of here, my friend. Thank you so much. I appreciate we got some breaking Bills news, so we got to get on that. Thank you so much for spending some time,
that.
Man.
Godspeed, always for you guys.
Later, brother. All right, Ryan, we got our first big Bills news of free agency. The first signing is in. It is Dee Alford, Atlanta Falcons cornerback. The Bills signed him to a 3-year, $21 million contract, $10 million guaranteed. So this is on the lower end of things. Doing a little bit of a dive here as we get into the player, your initial reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I remember him coming out years ago, liking his skill set, liking his game. I can't remember if I had him ever linked to the Bills at that point in time, but the Bills are addressing their secondary. Obviously, they traded Taron Johnson. We know what they have at cornerback 1 in Christian Benford, the promise of Max Hairston. But this is probably a player that fits what they're going to try to do a little bit more than an aging Taron Johnson, who's been banged up a lot, maybe isn't the ideal fit for what they're trying to do. So Alford, in terms of the secondary, the defensive back room, I like the deal. Knowing too that that's just based on the highest end of it. We're going to have to wait a few days to see the true terms of this deal. But a lot of times when you look, and this is an agreeable deal as is, I'm guessing it's going to look that much better on paper when we see the true terms of it.
Yeah, so has a little bit of experience playing both from what I'm seeing here, but it's an interesting use of resources because I think even after moving on from Taron Johnson, my first thought was cornerback would be off the table for a while, but now we're going to have to start to dig into the player and how he specifically fits into what Jim Leonhard wants to do. One of the things I see pop up initially as I'm kind of looking into some of his profiles and different things that have been written about him. Great communicator, which is something I think Jim Leonhard across the board at all 3 position levels. That's one of the things, especially in the back 7, back 8, however you want to look at it. That's something that he is going to be highly valued. Maybe somebody that, he's familiar with from his time at Wisconsin will do the dive on that as well. But this is the first swing of free agency. It's a little bit of a surprise for me.
A little bit. And he did play nickel cornerback last year, just looking that up. And he was coming off career highs in interceptions, 3, passes defense, 13. So he had a nice year in Atlanta. It's something where the Bills probably feel like he can fit in here. And, I'll be interested to see. I don't think, though, cornerback was the first position I expected them to address. I figured that would be linebacker or potentially something up front. But there must be something that Jim Leonhard really likes about his game. And I see people in here saying punt returner. I do have to look at the numbers there in terms of that. But something where I could at least see him coming in, competing for a role as that cornerback 3.
Yeah, he's been a slot cornerback mostly in the league. He was undrafted in 2020 out of Tuscaloosa. I've never even heard of that college. So there you have that. He played for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in 2020 and 2021. And then he ended up getting a reserve future deal with the Atlanta Falcons. So this is like truly a, success story that's pretty impressive. And that Atlanta Falcons defense was really good last year. It'll be interesting to hear where he specifically fits into what they want to do.
Yeah, and what the Bills were thinking in terms of targeting him before anyone else in free agency, what made him that player that they wanted to go and get out here on the first day of free agency.
We got almost 4,000 watching across every platform. We're going to be joined, I think, in a few minutes here by Adam Hill. I talked about some of my expectations for the next move for the Bills. Where are you looking? Is there anything offensively or wide receiver that you think could be in the mix here over the next couple of days? And how does this change things now that they've landed somebody that's probably going to get, 3-year, $21 million deal? That cap hit's probably going to be somewhere around $3 to $4 million. I would imagine they usually keep those pretty low in year 1 on that number. What can they do here on the heels of that?
Well, I still think there's a lot they can do, knowing that the first year cap it's probably going to be pretty low. But at wide receiver position, I think you got to let this market play out in terms of letting the money settle down a little bit. I saw in the chat someone mentioned Tyquan Thornton. That's a potential name if you're looking for more speed. I've already mentioned Mooney out of Atlanta as a potential fit for this team. So there are names out there in terms of just adding to the depth of this wide receiver room, adding some talent. But I don't know necessarily if that's the path that they should go right now. I feel like defense has to be their main focus.
I'm trying to pull up his PFF scores from last year. He played in 15 games. Dee Alford did, had 581 snaps for the Atlanta Falcons defense. Overall grade, not great, middle of the road, 52.8, probably a little bit lower than that. His lowest grade of 34 was in run defense. So that's kind of interesting. This is a guy probably a little bit more known for his ability to cover. I'll be very interested to see what the Bills say about this signing.
Yeah. Again, at least they're on the board now. Bills fans have been sitting here for hours waiting for the Bills to make some kind of move. And this is going to be the intrigue of a lot of the moves on the defense side of the ball this offseason in terms of what makes them a fit. Why were they aggressive to get Alfred before anyone else? And obviously, I'm sure the Bills run on a lot of other players, but there's negotiations ongoing.
We will get back to the Alfred signing momentarily, but before we do, let's go to Las Vegas, the desert. My guy, Adam Hill, busy on the Francisco Mendoza beat over the last couple of weeks. And lo and behold, they go out and they get themselves a franchise center for the new young buck with Tyler Linderbaum, which was absolutely a bomb today. I mean, the Bills got McGovern at 13 a year, 27 a year for Linderbaum. You weren't surprised, though.
No, I mean, look, I think he was going to be the number one target all along. The biggest question was how much competition was there going to be? I think there was a lot. The Raiders had a ton of money, so they were going to go spend what they had to spend. And is it a little high? Yeah, probably a little bit. But look, you have the cap space. You have the resources all throughout this offseason. Obviously, you're investing in what you believe will be a franchise quarterback. So you want to do everything you can to give them an ability to succeed. Also, kind of a very underrated part of this that you don't really think about that much. And John Spytek mentioned at the combine, and we all kind of chuckled about it, but he said, look, Mendoza has never really taken a snap before. That's kind of a big question. And now you get a center who can kind of guide him through, and like you can trust in the center, right? Where it's like, all right, if he's going to start taking snaps under center, which he has to do in this offense, at least we've got a center that you trust and has experience and is one of the best in the league. So it's kind of a weird kind of dynamic to this, but it's certainly part of it that they just want to have everything in place for Mendoza to succeed. And that's kind of why they did this.
Yeah, absolutely important as well. I mean, early in Josh Allen's tenure, that's why the Bills signed Mitch Morse to a big deal. So that's a sign of a good team. And another move that the Raiders made today was at wide receiver, Jalen Naylor, a player that Matt and I talked about potentially being someone that the Bills could look at before the DJ Moore trade. What are your initial thoughts on Jalen Naylor?
Well, I have a lot, and I've seen him play many, many, many times. He is a local. He's a Las Vegas kid. So Bishop Gorman High School returns home, big homecoming for Jalen Naylor. A lot of people here are very excited. Speed for Jalen Naylor. That's the book. I watched him win a couple of state titles in a track meet here in Vegas. The guy's incredibly fast and, hasn't had the production necessarily in Minnesota. But when he's been called upon, he's made plays. Obviously, he's been buried on a depth chart with some pretty decent receivers, and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison there. So hasn't had the opportunity. I think he'll definitely have the opportunity here. And again, like we talked about a little bit with Linderbaum, it's putting pieces in place. Like you've got to find, guys that can help your young quarterback succeed. If it is Mendoza, which it almost certainly will be, you've got to give them guys. They've got the tight end, they got a running back. Now they put a center in front of them. They're going to probably sign another offensive lineman or draft one potentially. But now you've got a receiver because the receiving core. I know Brock Bowers is the number one receiver, even though he's not a receiver. The receiving core is not good. They have a lot of work to do, and I don't know that Jalen Naylor is the last piece of that because I really like Jalen a lot as a person and as a player, but I don't think he's the guy you plug in there and say, "Hey, he's your number one receiver going forward." It's funny at the combine. Somebody asked, because right now Jack Bash, who was a second-round pick last year, good quality possession guy, really good kid also, would be kind of the number one receiver on the depth chart. And one of the reporters kind of nationally asked John Spytek, "Are you comfortable going into the season in believing Jack Bash as a number one receiver?" And his answer was like, "Well, I mean, I believe in him as a player. I don't know that we're going to put labels on that necessarily. But yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of work to do at receiver for sure. And Jalen Naylor is a piece, and they've got, still plenty of, even though they spent a lot of money today, they've got plenty of assets remaining or, plenty of ability remaining to sign guys and also, up to 10 draft picks now, 2 in the first round. So I think they'll be still investing in the receiving core.
Some of the money that they've spent is on now former nickel cornerback for the Bills, Taron Johnson.
Yeah.
Your reaction to that addition? Obviously, somebody that they got in there before he could hit the free agent market. They're going to probably bring him in on what'll probably be a 1-year deal, but a guy that has veteran leadership, all those kinds of things. Did you hear how that came to be? Because I've been kind of fishing around just trying to figure out, like, did they just call out of the blue? I haven't heard anything. So the Bills were going to release Taron Johnson.
Yeah.
And then a couple days later, this thing pops across the bottom line.
Well, they didn't have to give up a lot. They certainly needed help at corner. It's I think we can say this about most position groups of Raiders. Like, they don't have a whole lot there. And they were able to get Eric Stokes, their top corner from last year, back, who had a pretty successful season, but he's never really been able to stay healthy. Finally did last year. The Kelsey money just came across. $12 million for Kelsey, it looks like. Pretty good deal.
Yeah.
I love I did. Sorry, I'm sidetracked, but I did love, like, people this morning, like, well, there's a big market for him out there. Like, he's not going somewhere else.
Yeah, no,
like, he's in Kansas City or nothing. Like, let's relax with that one. But yeah, I think what basically happened is that's a guy they were going to target potentially in free agency if he was released. They kind of figured out what the deal was going to be, and not a whole lot of risk there for that contract, obviously, and not a lot guaranteed. I think only $1.75 million is guaranteed when he is on the roster in 5 days, which he will be. So not a whole lot of risk, and they just said, okay, pick swap 6th to 7th. That really was almost 2 full rounds. So the Bills got some value out of that, even though that they took on some dead cap for that move as well. But I think it's just the Raiders saying, we have a ton of draft capital, might as well use a little bit of it, very little, but a little bit of it to get a guy we were going to try to sign anyway, in Taron Johnson, who, Matt, I do, I have my feelings, but I do still follow the Bills pretty closely. He's been basically my favorite player on the roster the last couple of years to watch. So kind of fun for me to be able to watch him here in Vegas. But I think he hasn't 2023 was exceptional. He was phenomenal that season. I'm telling you guys things you already know, obviously. And he's getting a little bit older, but I think he's still got that ability there. And I think this system will fit him pretty well. I think there's a lot of things they're going to be able to use him for. And Rob Leonard, the new defensive coordinator, who nobody really knows much about what he's going to try to do, except we know who he's worked for in the past, and Mike McDonald for sure, and Brian Flores. So he's going to, I think, be aggressive in a lot of the ways that they are. And I think Johnson's going to be a guy that they deploy in a couple of different ways. And he's effective against the run. Obviously, he can cover. There's a lot of things he can do. I think they're pretty excited about adding him.
So obviously that division's still very tough. The Chiefs are looking to bounce back. Denver had a great year. The Chargers had a solid year as well. But what is it like right now in Las Vegas for this fan base? Because you've already mentioned the quarterback. They're making the additions at the O-line, but then they also go out and get Clint Kubiak, who might have been the top coaching candidate on a lot of people's boards based on the fact of what he did there in Seattle and helping with Sam Darnold. Knowing that the Raiders are probably still a few years away, what is it like there right now, though, in terms of the excitement level?
Well, it's the same as last year. They were going to win the Super Bowl last year. They're going to win the Super Bowl this year. I'm not sure if you know how fans operate, but that's kind of how things work. Kubiak was a good hire, but I think it's an example of kind of where this franchise is. Everybody knows that the organization has been a mess for a long time. Last year, they hired John Spytek as general manager, who I raved about when he was hired. I raved about before he was hired. I thought when they hired Tom Telesco before, they should have hired John Spytek. I've been a John Spytek fan for a long time. And then once Pete Carroll got hired, I was very down on the team and said, I don't think this is going to work. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all to me. And it didn't. Like, I think we saw how that played out. Pete Carroll wanted to try to win, and he kind of forced some moves on Spytek, like signing a Tyler Lockett, like trying to add Amari Cooper, where he was like, hey, let's just go try to compete with how we can now. It made no sense. And Spytek wanted to build long-term, which was the thing he should have done. And now that Carroll's gone, I think what you're seeing is John Spytek building what he wants to build. You shop Max Crosby, get 2 picks for him. I think it was a very, very good move. I'm surprised he was able to get 2 first-round picks, especially one that's number 14.
Yeah.
I thought that's really impressive. I thought he did a great job with that trade, kind of keeping things quiet, even though it was ugly between Crosby and the organization. Like, Spytek found a way to keep it quiet and be responsible and get good picks. And I think we're seeing John Spytek here. And so I guess my way of answering what I'm saying a lot here, but it's that I believe in what John Spytek is trying to build, and he can finally do it now. And a lot of fans here, when you say that, are like, he was here last year, it sucked, and they were terrible, and he didn't know what he was doing. Like, no, he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do. And I think you're finally seeing now. I wrote a column the other day that that weird feeling you're getting is called competence. Like they're a competent organization right now. And I think there are some factors at work. I think the Tom Brady situation is kind of a mess because he doesn't live here. He's not around here. Everybody thinks he's in charge, and he's making decisions, but he's not here day to day. That's weird. But I think Spytek is the right guy to try to move forward with. And we saw it with the Kubiak hire. They stayed patient. They didn't freak out and say, oh, we're losing out on time to hire assistant coaches and all this other stuff. Like, they waited on their guy. They got their guy. They trusted in that process. And now they're kind of doing the same thing here, building things the right way. And I've been impressed with what Spytek's done. I think there are still some fans that are skeptical because they think, last year was was him showing that he didn't know what he was doing. But I think that there should be some faith in that. And I believe in what he's doing right now.
Adam, thank you so much for hanging out with us, my friend. Go enjoy this rest of this busy day for you and probably the rest of this busy off season.
Yeah, I don't think they're done. So I'll get right back on it. I appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Take care. Adam Hill, Las Vegas Review-Journal. We got some news. Carl Jones has a ton of hits in this next half hour, so he's not going to be able to make it on. But I wanted to finish up before we sign off here. We got over 4,000 people watching live, which is super awesome. Thank you so much. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. I want to go a little bit deeper on Dee Alford because I did get a text message back on him. I said, anything you could tell me about Dee from somebody that covered the Falcons last year. And he said, he's a great dude, undrafted guy from a tiny school, had to go to the CFL, worked his ass off and had a breakout year in 2025, played nickel and on the outside effectively as a utility guy for Atlanta this past season. So he wasn't a starter. Guy gets hurt. He ends up going in for him later last year, had himself a pretty good run. Probably more of a slot nickel corners. That's probably what Jim Leonard wants to utilize him as in this defense. I said, are you surprised at the number? And he said, surprised for sure. He wasn't a starter, but filled in when guys were hurt. The thing is though, Ryan, with that 3-year, $21 million number, I don't think you should overreact to that because that's just the initial number. Up to $21 million could be, it's a 3-year, $14 million contract with incentives out the wazoo, and it's a $2 million cap hit this season. Not one of those deals that you need to overreact to until we see the final number.
That's 100% correct. I think that fans hopefully have learned over the years, don't react, to the initial numbers, because this 3-year deal could be more of a 1-year deal in terms of the guarantees, or a 2-year deal, and cap hits can be low. The incentives can be almost unattainable, minus getting a lot of playing time due to injuries elsewhere. So wait for the final numbers. This is a player that has the versatility to play inside and outside, someone that, again, the Bills had to like enough to pursue here on day one of free agency, where they wanted to get him in, add him into the mix and into the fold, where they have a vision for him, whether that's just utility or depth. Maybe it has something to do with how they want to use him schematically in terms of pressuring, whatever the case may be. But what we'll hear from, obviously, Jim Leonard, we'll hear from Dee Alford. It's going to be exciting to at least hear what made these two a match.
The Denver Broncos got a head start at linebacker, re-signing Justin Strnad before the start of free agency. They've now inked Alex Singleton, who is somebody that you mentioned a couple of times as a potential target, $15.5 million on a 2-year deal with $11 million guaranteed. How does that hit you? Is that something that you would have considered if you were the Bills?
Yeah, I definitely would have. What's surprising to me, and again, it's the fan base, but Denver's fan base seemed really willing and wanting to kind of move on from Singleton. So I'll be interested to hear what the fan base has to say on that. I feel like he's a player, though, that has made plays time and time again in Denver, has a really cool story, very much like Alfred in terms of having to go to the CFL at one point in his career and build up his career that way after floating on practice squads and offseason rosters to where he is now, having a stint in Philly and a good stint here in Denver, now sticking there. He had ties to Jim Leonard. He was not the guy in terms of best fit. I think Leo Chanel is, but I want to see them bring in someone that has direct ties to the new defensive coordinator that can help with the communication aspect of this defense. He's off the board now, obviously, so there's still some other options out there.
It is 5:30 on this Monday, March 9th. I think that we're going to wrap it right here. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for about 90 minutes. If anything major comes down, we'll be back later on to talk about it. I'm glad we were able to do the Dee Alford move with you right here on this live episode. Something big comes down the pipe. We will be live once again. So make sure if you're on YouTube, the best way to track it, like every video, subscribe to the channel, hit that little icon that has a little bell. That way, every time we go live, you get the notification on your phone. You can jump right in, get in the conversation. We really appreciate it, everybody. Final word, Ryan Talbot.
Yeah, final word, stick with us. It's going to be a busy week. We'll have plenty of other shows for you, maybe as soon as tonight. Stay tuned.
Take care, everybody.